Today is May 25th, 2021. My name is John Swain, and I'll be conducting this oral history interview with Chris Schumacher, a former Navy corpsman and veteran of the Global War on Terror. Tonight, Chris will be sharing his experiences during Bravo Company 4th Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion's 2009 deployment to Helmand Province, Afghanistan, part of Operation Enduring Freedom. This interview is pursuant to the practicum requirements for American Military University's Masters in Public History. It will also be submitted to the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress for the benefit of future generations. Chris, please state your rank, name, and birth date for the record.
Hospital Corpsman, First Class, Fleet Marine Force Warfare Qualified, Christopher Schumacher. Retired.
So tell me a little bit about your life before the military.
Life before the military, nothing really atypical. I grew up in rural Mississippi. Spent a lot of time outdoors, playing outside, playing in the woods. Grew up small town school, K through 12 was 600 people. Played some sports, a little bit of basketball, a little bit of baseball. Played in the high school band. Nothing really, super out, crazier.
What drove your decision to join the military?
I grew up, watching my dad. My dad was a Vietnam veteran Marine, and some part of me always knew that was the direction I wanted to go. I could probably go back and say as far as fourth grade, I kind of knew I was going to go in the military and, do some form of service. And as I got closer, I enlisted the summer of my senior year, so I had a year in delayed entry program. The more closer I got, the more my dad talked about Vietnam with me, about being a Marine with me. He's opened up a lot of insight to me. I was pushed away from the Marine Corps, not because my dad dislikes the Marines. He loves the Marines. He wanted something he considered better for me. So we looked at the Army, looked at the Navy. The Navy offered me, a chance. And initially, I think it was to be a rescue swimmer. I got sidetracked along the way and ended up becoming a corpsman. But yes, 2 weeks after graduating high school, I was in basic training.
Do you remember where you were on September 11th, 2001?
September 11th, 2001, I was stationed here at Patuxent River Naval Air Station as part of the Naval Health Clinic's EMS division. And I was actually on duty that day at the firehouse, and one of the civilian firefighters called us in to see the TV and thought it was an accident that an airplane flew into the first tower. Then we watched the second airplane fly into the other tower. From there, base went on lockdown, and we started hearing more about the Pentagon, and then the Flight 93 into Pennsylvania.
Why exactly did you become a Navy corpsman?
Early in my service career, I was a member of the United States Navy Ceremonial Guard. Our job is to put a face on the Navy. We conduct, retirements. We conduct White House arrivals, parades. We also do funerals at Arlington Cemetery. But one of my friends I got to know there talked to me into being a corpsman, told me that, hey, yeah, I see, we talked about being search and rescue, talked about this, talked about that. Hey, he said, corpsmen go everywhere. You want to be on a submarine, they got corpsmen. You want to go into a aviation community like a squadron, they got corpsmen. You want to go on a surf ship, they got corpsmen. You want to go hospital, you want to learn about being a corpsman. And guess what? They also have them with the Marines. I said, all right, man, sounds good. I didn't want to be stuck behind a desk. That was one of the reasons when I joined the Navy's requirements. I didn't want to be stuck somewhere where I was pulling desk duty and a boring job. So, and ironically now he is a neurologist and lieutenant commander, last I checked, in the U.S. Navy. So, yes.
What brought you to Bravo Company 4th LAR?
I was coming off my active duty, 8 years of active duty, and I enlisted into the reserves. And the orders came up for 4th Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, and that's where kind of, and so much I didn't have a choice as much as this is where they want to send you. It's like, all right, cool, I'm going back to the green side, which I had spent 3 years with 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines, India Company, down in Camp Lejeune before coming to Pax River, so I have had an experience with it. And after being at Pax, I kind of wanted to get back out to doing, being a real corpsman.
And when did you check in with Bravo Company?
Oh, June or July of 2002, if I remember correctly. It was, I want to say June of 2002 because I left active duty in May of 2002 from here at Pax.
So what was your experience with Bravo Company prior to the 2009 deployment?
Woo! Where do we start? I checked on board, real quickly learned what their schedule was like. They like to cram as much stuff as possible into a short amount of time as possible. You have 48 hours to see people, see faces, and there wasn't, and when I say cram things, it's not a bad thing. It's like they're trying to make use of as much time as possible to get as much stuff done as possible for as many people as possible. So you would come in on Friday evenings, do a quick muster. You would be up till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe pack a bus, go out to a range, get up at 5, conduct the range, go to bed at 10, 11 o'clock at night, get up the next morning, either conduct the range again or get ready to head back, clean up, conduct, post-range ops, anything medical that you had to do. Once we got back to the rear, we were gathering people up. We got to do this medical, maybe immunizations. It may be blood draws. It may be checking somebody out for an injury. But a lot of our administrative stuff, once we got back, was turned to before 1700 departure of the day, evening, for the drill weekend.
When and how did you first learn that you'd be deploying to Afghanistan with Bravo Company?
It was after our second tour in Iraq. We were, the current CO at the time was Major Carey, and he talked to myself and a few others and asked us if we would be going back to Afghanistan. And at that time, I had no other plans of leaving the company, so I said, yes. I don't see why not. It was I was kind of in a battle rhythm at that point. I did the OIF, participated with the Charlie Company at the time with OIF Invasion in 2003. Then came back and went to Okinawa that year for UDP for 6 months. Came back in 2004, 2006. We're stepping right out the door to Iraq as DSU. Come back in 2007, and 2009 is rolling around. We were in a battle rhythm. Every 2 to 3 years, we were heading out the door, and it made sense.
How old were you at the time?
I was 32 when I learned about it. I think 33 when we went.
So as you mentioned, this wasn't your first combat deployment. Far from it. How did you feel prior to this deployment versus prior to your other ones? Was it any different?
I think the first one was definitely an unknown factor. I had less of the pre-deployment jitters. I kind of knew what to expect, kind of knew what to feel. On the other hand, it was each time you go to do anything in a combat zone, you're rolling the dice. You don't know what's going to exactly happen. One day, 1 month, 1 year in country can, it doesn't matter. Anybody can come back, go there and not come back. But it was how many times we're going to poke this bear. So that was pretty much the biggest thing on my mind, is just the time we poked the bear.
Is that what you anticipated the most?
Yes.
So what did you do to get yourself personally ready?
I don't remember having much. I was also in school at the time, so personally ready, I was kind of also focused on my schooling, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to think on it. And yes, I personally focused in school, so my mind was elsewhere. And when I wasn't in school, simple things, working out, just keeping busy.
So you've been with the unit for a number of years before the 2009 deployment. Who were some of your closest friends that deployed with you to Afghanistan?
HM1 Brian Bombach. He was my ALPO. He and I were in DSU together, at Haditha together. Frank Moran, my team leader, he and I were once again at DSU, came up together, and he was one of the guys on our ground combat element. DSU was my team leader in Afghanistan. Judd Hahn. I got to know a lot of the guys, like Andrew Maestros, Justin Saunier, Frank Doucette, Doug Toulot, while we're working up and while we're there, but definitely Brian Bombach, Frank Moran, Judd Hahn.
Who are some of your mentors?
Master Guns Hilton was definitely a mentor of mine for a long time. I remember him picking up gunnery sergeant, but he's always had that calm demeanor, and if you ever let him down, or you got an ass chewing from him, you were mad not because you got an ass chewing, but you mad because you let down somebody that you respected dearly. HM2 King was my old LPO. He was a mentor of mine, always compassionate, always trying to think for the greater good, and taught me to try to think that way. So I'll say those two guys were big mentors of mine.
So Bravo Company activated in the summer of 2009, went out to California, Camp Pendleton. How were you trained for the war?
Most of the training I really remember that I would say trained for the war was taking place in 29 Palms when we went to, practice a lot of counterinsurgency operations, the control, hold, and build exercise where we participated in the little makeshift town of Fatwan. There's a lot of dealing with people that resembled either Arabic or Persian, Arabic or Persian people. There was a lot of Arabic speaking, maybe some Pashto or Persian there as well. So learning to deal with people that either looked like, act like, or were these people kind of brought a semblance of realism to us. There was also a couple of good combat medical training, combat medical exercises they ran us through where we had to deal with a mass casualty, blast, injuries, and it was a great example of what they could do with actors and makeup. It was that and pyrotechnics. So there was a lot of special effects going on. They had a really good special effects department and role players to help us out with our realism of the training. I remember that much of it being how they kind of prepared us.
What kind of gear or equipment did you train with?
Pretty much stuff that was issued. If we're not on LAVs, we train. The vests we trained with were a lot heavier because they were bulkier. We had them. Wasn't the plate carriers? We used plate carriers in country, but the
MTVs.
MTVs, yes, they were bulky, but got used to it. That's really not too much, anything special that normal units wouldn't have used before used during that time.
Did you feel that you were sufficiently trained before you left?
If I had to compare it to my DSU workup, I would say no. It's kind of curt and blunt, but DSU workup was a whole nother beast. Felt like our focus at times was more of going through we got to get these little nuances out of the way. You got to do certain trainings to get out of the way just so you can get into doing stuff like, once again, we got to 29 Palms and actually got into the training. That was good training there. Before that, there was some training when we go out, but the thing's a lot of time spent into my chagrin with that as well, not doing what we should have been doing. We were running around dealing with paperwork sometimes, I think, or chasing people down for eyewear or medications, or at least the medical side of the house. It seemed like the Marines were busy a lot of times on the ramp, working on the vehicles. But that's just my personal perspective. I didn't see privy to some of the other thought processes on that.
What did you think of your leadership before you left?
Felt we were in good hands. We were deploying with a combat tested master sergeant and now master guns, retired Hilton. I always felt comfortable with him, and he was even keeled. I had leadership that was returning from a previous deployment, Captain Newkirk, who I had the utmost confidence in, and I knew where he stood and what he was capable of, so I was comfortable with him, yes.
So when you left for Afghanistan, who did you leave behind, and how did you say goodbye back here at home?
I left my wife behind. My wife was pregnant at the time with my oldest son, Jonathan. We said goodbye in the airport not once, but twice at least. She came out to visit once. I came home on block leave, and initially I was supposed to go back from block leave and head over, but then I had another layover or another period of wait before the aircraft, so I came home real quickly one more time, hoping to see my son born, but that was not happening, so she put me on the airplane twice, which definitely not a lot of fun for her. I'm not saying it was fun for me either, but not a lot of fun for her.
How'd you get to Afghanistan?
We all hopped a commercial plane to I want to say Ramstein, Germany. From Ramstein, we took that same plane to Kyrgyzstan. We took a C-17 into Helmand Province, and from Leatherneck, we helicoptered into helicopter to the castle from there.
Did you know exactly where you were going when you left the United States?
Yes, roughly.
What were your first impressions when you arrived at your area of operations in Kanishn Castle, Helmand Province?
The battalion commander wasn't lying. One of the earlier memories of during our work of the battalion commander talking to us, Colonel Martin, and said this would be a camping trip gone bad, and it really was. It was a rustic environment. Haditha Dam, where I came from, had every amenity you can possibly imagine, and we were still a 4 echelon unit, whereas Kanishn Castle, we got out there, guys are hand washing their laundry. There was no DFAC there, eating UGRs, MREs day in and day out, or you supplemented from the bazaar. It was a mud wall castle. That was the cool part, is we stayed at Kanishn Castle, and some of the people like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan had been through there and stayed at these places, and a place of history for us. So that was kind of cool.
What was your first mission out of Kanishn Castle?
I don't remember. First op was a night op, and I was there maybe a couple of days, and they put me on asked if I wanted to go out on a night op. Sure, and I was still doing our rip in with 2nd LAR. I remember getting back used to NVGs and watching guys that had been there for 6-7 months, doing this the whole time, tripping and falling. Then, of course, later on that night, I found the side of an irrigation canal the hard way.
Did you have a clear understanding of what you were expected to do in country?
We were to keep our area of Helmand Province, free and clear of the Taliban. However it may be, make friends with the locals and drive out, the not so nice people. as medical, we were to keep everybody on their toes, and healthy as possible at all times whenever we can. If we had to, go to work, it was never a fun day, but we were always ready to assist.
What did an average day look for you? The first couple of weeks you were there.
First couple of weeks there is getting into the battle rhythm, learning what Second LAR did, how they ran operations, going out, getting used to what vehicles we were on. I was assigned to the medevac platform for Bravo Company, and also designated as Black 8. The first sergeant's vehicle we had rolled with 2 stretchers. Basically, we were rolling up armored ambulance, kind of for intermediate medical needs until we can get a helicopter in. Learned kind of how that ran. Just got used to the, day patrols, night patrols, convoys out to the patrol bases, Quality Knowledge, Shabu, and yes, that was pretty much it.
Was it difficult adjusting to that, combat rotation that you were on?
I didn't think it was terribly difficult. Just I've been on a couple of deployments before. After a while, some things were very similar, and it was just another day at the office, basically.
What was your relationship with the locals like?
Up around the castle, they were generally pretty nice. Maybe a little spoiled from the previous unit. I think the previous unit gave them candy and such a little too freely at times, and came back to bite us here and there. But locals are, generally pretty friendly where we were at.
And what about the Afghani security forces that were posted with you?
The initial group was a little sketchy, I'll be honest, and they ended up having a problem where they had to fly the bulk majority of them out due to, at the very least, drug usage. They stayed over on the other side of the wall from us in the same compound, but generally they stayed over there. We stayed on our side. They also had their military training team with them to kind of keep them somewhat under, in their area.
Did you have any translators you worked with?
Andy or Andish and Sammy are the 2 I remember the most. There were a few others, but Andy and Sammy are 2 I remember the most, and 2 of the ones I actually enjoyed working with.
What did you do with any free time you had?
Free time. Occasionally we catch up on a movie or something, or go check the phone center, call home occasionally if we were in the area. That was, maybe watch the guys play a board game or something. It was, free time was kind of where we were at, kind of a little bit of a luxury at times.
How far into the deployment was your first son born?
Jonathan was born 2 weeks once I was in the country.
When did you first find that out?
I think it was probably the morning after we were stepping off for foot patrol, and one of the corpsmen from the battalion aid station came down and told me that Chief wanted to see me, and it's like, what the hell did I do wrong? It's like, but I came back up there and he had the Red Cross letter and told me to go call home, so I got to hold the foot patrol for 20 minutes so I can call home and talk to Christy and hear about Jonathan.
So when was your first contact with the enemy?
I want to say Tunbad. That was the one where we were going out to Gaz, and we were doing a lot of canal crossings. During the day it wasn't. We were just hopping canals, but that afternoon on the way back, we were back to crossing canals, and kind of a funny story, we were pole vaulting a canal. So we were coming back. wet and muddy, and we had a couple of guys follow us on motorcycles, which got a little tense for a moment, but they finally decided best not to, torque us up anymore, so they left. But we were all waiting in this one rally point for the vehicles, and I remember hearing indirect fire come overhead, and one of those moments is like, it's a pucker factor, but you also inside, not a whole lot you can do, but just make yourself small as possible and hope it doesn't land on you.
Can you talk a little bit more about that operation you were on out toward Tagaz? This is in December?
Yes, I want to say it was definitely in December, because I remember we were heading out to Tagaz. I don't know if they were rumored that there was supposed to be more Taliban out that way, but we were foot mobile most of the time, carrying makeshift, foot ladders or something to cross these, irrigation canals. There's a lot of irrigation canals out there, and a lot of jumping across these canals, getting wet. Got into Tagaz, and really wasn't much of anything there. The operation itself was probably a little more boring. Not a lot happened during the operation. In fact, it was seemed like to me at the time kind of a bust. But it was when we left and we were heading out, and we had crossing these canals back, and we ran into the two motorcycle riders, and they were tailing us, and finally got the hint to beat feet, but probably also the same ones that dialed us in for or at least called their buddies home. We're in the area for indirect fire.
What was the biggest threat you faced overseas?
Biggest threat I faced overseas? It's a hard one. I mean, I would say probably more than anything was the IEDs. We didn't see much of the Taliban. In fact, guys out y'all out Shabu had it more than we did up there in the castle or near Fob Payne, but the IEDs seem to be more of the threat than the actual members themselves. They place them, but a lot of times, we never see anybody setting them off. Occasionally, we'd have some indirect fire when we later on in the deployment.
In January 2010, Bravo Company embarked on their first large-scale offensive in the Taliban-occupied areas in an an operation named Operation Western Light. So tell me a little bit about what you remember of the operation, preparing for it, executing it.
I remember more of executing it. This was a lot of it was second platoon, and the platoon I was originally supposed to be with before I moved up to be the senior corpsman of the company. So it was second platoon reinforced. So it had elements of headquarters out there, like the logistical vehicle. I want to say we had one of the doctors with us too. Commander Bell was really good about going out with us a lot on bigger operations, and first couple of days are kind of dry, nothing big, in and out, checking people here and there. But towards the end, we did catch a couple of guys. I think they ran into our area, and they were a couple of Taliban jihadis, clean shaven. One guy actually had a grenade in his pocket, and Dan Gale was searching them and found it, and those guys got rolled up real quickly. They had RPGs and such in the back of their truck. Later on, that operation, I want to say it's that same operation, we stopped I can't remember how many kilos of heroin. That was the other big thing. They would run heroin out there and just trying to chase them down for that, but it was a massive amount. That's the best way I can put it. I'm trying to remember. I wish I had a picture here, but it was a lot of heroin that we pulled off that truck.
Can you tell me a little bit about preparing for the operation and the push into Tagaz there in the mid-January?
One was just getting used to the Ospreys, because this is the time of the deployment. The Ospreys are coming into the picture, replacing the CH-46, is what I remember. When we first came in, the CH-46s and 53s were dropping us off and picking us up and stuff. But I remember a lot of practice, a lot of rehearsals, exiting the Ospreys and, practicing any kind of assault on, say, the target house or the village itself. One of the Ospreys landed a little too close to us. We got rotor washed and knocked over, pelted with rocks. I remember, Gunny Wynn getting rolling over beside me, just getting knocked down.
On January 23rd, 2010, Bravo Company's 3rd Platoon was struck by a dismounted suicide bomber as they occupied their patrol base in the Zarandakale Bazaar, which inflicted mass casualties on the Marines. Can you tell me your recollections of that event? What led up to it? What occurred on that day?
The day before was the initial bit of Tagaz, going into Tagaz was pretty, pretty kinetic. Had a little bit of kinetic at first, a quick little shoot 'em up, but that was taken care of. They secured it. A couple days later, the MEF commander colonel came out along with the sergeant major, and I believe, and definitely the MEF master chief was out there. And I remember meeting him, and it was kind of like, all right, hey, everybody's out here looking around. They left. The day after, so that was a normal day. We were getting ready to head back to the castle with a detainee that had been taken by 3rd Platoon the night before. So it's going to be like a little supply run, drop off the detainee, come back out, and we heard the explosion. And then within seconds, I remember Master Guns Hilton telling us to get this detainee out of the back in as calm as voice possible and clear the back of his log. And less than a minute, we cleared the back of the log, including detainee, and we beat feet down there. Master Guns, trying to remember who's Corporal Trigger, I think Sergeant Trigger. Lance Corporal Schwartz and myself, and then we picked up a corpsman, I don't know his name, from 7th Engineer Support Battalion, and Doc Bell was out with us. He was on the CO's LAV, and we drove out there as far as we could, and we still had a canal crossing we had to get over. It was maybe a quarter-mile shuffle, but it just felt like it took forever and just winded. We're coming up, I think Commander Bell's already headed out towards where the blast was. And we had a couple other injuries already pulled aside. One was a bunch of kids. The engineer corpsman said he was handling that. He went over to handle that. I came up to Staff Sergeant now Gunny Lasley, and he had O'Sullivan and Corporal O'Sullivan and Lance Corporal Hoey. O'Sullivan had a chest wound from one of the ball bearings, having some difficulty breathing. Hoey had a compound fracture of the right forearm and at least shrapnel in his knee, if not worse. I worked on them for, to get them packed, bandaged up and ready for medevac. And during that time, I was talking to Staff Sergeant Lasley, and I asked him, "Where's Doc Chi?" And Lasley just kind of shook his head and was like, kind of that moment, he let out a few explicatives and was like, moving forward, we got those two ready to roll. I moved on up to where Commander Bell was, and Doc Garcia was up there already working and he was one of the first ones to actually respond to the scene. He was initially working on Chi, and Commander Bell had to pull him off Chi so they can work on Smith. There was, more, wasn't much left to work with on Chi. Vitals weren't there, and Smith had vital signs. He was still kicking. And during this time, I don't know who looked at Lance Corporal Nick and for his head injury, and so we got everybody packaged up. Helicopters are coming in. We're cleaning things up. The locals are taking care of their dead people. But I think a couple of kids were medevaced out with our people as well. We all put, Chi and Kane on a helicopter. That's when we found Lance Corporal Kevin Miller, and he was holding security on the corner with a tourniquet, an elastic tourniquet wrapped around his hands. He had a wrist laceration. And, it was a little grumpy, but he was there. But it was more he was there. He's doing his job. It's just that he wasn't brought up to, hey, we need to have this guy looked at, and all the flights were already heading out, and we had to call one of them back, and it was one of the Angel flights, and it kind of bothered me that he was on a flight with his buddy that was killed. But after we finished medevacing everybody out, we were still surveying the scene, seeing what was around there, and yeah, it was a rough day. We got back to the kind of makeshift patrol base. First platoon was holed up in, and that's when I got to see the Sergeant Major Cottle, and Colonel Martin. Sergeant Major told me he was sorry to hear about my corpsman. And it wasn't just lip service. You can see it in his eyes. You can hear it in his voice. Yeah. And got Colonel Martin come along, and he's doing what he needs to be doing to get, hey, you still got to keep your head in the game. Keep your head up, Doc. You still got a job to do. And he's absolutely right. But I remember both of them. And both for good reasons. The Sergeant Major will always, his words always stick with me.
So this event occurred, roughly halfway through the deployment. Still had a job to do, obviously. Still had several months to go. How'd you cope with this kind of loss, with the hit that the company took during the deployment?
It was a hard hit. Sergeant Smith was, I lost a corpsman that was, doing his best with what he was given. Sergeant Smith was the company's A gamer. He's been on 2 deployments with him. I knew him. He's, a great guy. I remember people like him in high school. They can play sports. They can do academics. They have a great personality. They are, have great looks, and just good people. And he was that. And a lot of people looked up to him. And, I looked up to him. I have a fond memory of, roughhousing with him and, Corporal Keller during the time. It was hard. I think the company's, at least my attitude, kind of got a lot colder at that point. I don't think we were nearly as friendly to the locals when they came up on us. We were a lot more cautious and a lot more just bitter, bitter and cold. And even the day after, we had a couple that were trying to push a car and push it towards our vehicle right after all this happened, and we were like motion to stop, and when the first sergeant actually got out of his vehicle to go tell him to stop because they were about 2 seconds from getting shot. And trying to wave him down. Finally, it turned out that they had car problems. But at that point, it was less of like, oh, I'm looking at you got a car problem. More like, are you gonna blow us up? And whatnot. It was like a switch flipped on us. At least me.
What did you do after this operation to Dagaz? How did the next phase of the deployment look?
We were busy. We'd go out for a couple weeks at a time, sit, monitor rat lines, check for people, trying to run either drugs up. Sometimes we catch a few people coming up with, Taliban papers. Mostly a lot of, how I understood was intel gathering, maybe a little census gathering of who's what, and collecting intel on that, on human biometrics.
How'd you feel about the company's new mission? This is a little more different than what they'd been doing over the past couple of months.
I don't think I had a real big feeling either way. It was just like we go out for a couple weeks, we come back in for a couple of days, go back out for a couple of weeks, and it was a rhythm. There was a lot of boredom out there at times because I'm sitting waiting to see if somebody comes by. Somebody doesn't, so we move and go someplace else. But there was a couple of tense moments with other companies you hear come over the radio. But yeah, it was most of the time just a lot of boredom. Just waiting to see if something happens. And I think all this time, either Marja was about ready to kick off, if it hasn't kicked off, and some of the guys did have a few questions why we going up there. We were down south of that.
So are there any events over the next couple of weeks of the deployment, couple of months that stand out to you?
Around the 23rd is really when it stood out to me. It was either, if it wasn't the 23rd, it was right around there. I mean, it was we took a lot of indirect fire while we were, coiled up outside, and you almost set your clock to it, and actually got to the point where it's just a little annoying. But as it kind of got settled into once again a rhythm, so it wasn't anything really super. Watched, every time we come back in, something new was built up there at Fob Payne. So we moved out of the castle. I think I was a little remiss about moving out of the castle. I liked the castle. Fob Payne was not as much fun. But the rest of the deployment was kind of.
When did you first get the news about Sergeant Major Cottle?
I don't remember the exact day when I got his news. I just remember going to the memorial service and thinking it was just a few weeks before that he was at our memorial service, paying his respects. Yeah.
Do you remember when you were first notified that you'd be rotating back home?
Remember Senior Chief Peterson telling me we were coming home in May. I think we already kind of had a glimpse of it. I started seeing people from 1st LAR start to show up out there. I think it was April we started talking about it more. by May we're trying to get some idea of like how we're getting home, because the corpsmen were they were trying to send us home a different way than with our company. At the time, they wanted us to go and stay in the company, go all the way back to Frederick, and the corpsmen just stay there in California, but not the corpsmen come home with the company they served with.
How'd you feel once you started to get that news, that the deployment's winding down, you'd be coming home?
I was excited, but I didn't want to focus on that. It's something that's at the time wasn't tangible for me. It's not like okay, it's cool, it's coming up, but I still had a mission to do out there. We still had to roll out with rip out with first LAR, so we still had time. We can't start daydreaming, thinking about what home's gonna be like.
Did you feel that you had accomplished the mission that you set out to complete?
That's a hard answer. That's a really hard answer. I can't really answer that one, honestly. Counterinsurgency is a really, as far as what the company, the battalion was doing there, it's hard to really say. Did we go out and expand our area? Yes. We set up run Taliban out of Tagaz? Yes. Fortunately, we lost 7 guys in the process. I know other groups have lost more, some have lost less, but one life's still, it's hard to say, man.
Did you feel you made any kind of difference if you didn't feel as accomplished with the mission?
That make a difference? That's another one's hard to say. I met some, like I say, I met Andy and I met Sammy. They're 2 of our interpreters, I remember, and they were good guys. I think they, think highly of them. They, there's good in the people of Afghanistan. Afghanistan's a disjointed country, and I have a saying that Afghanistan made Iraq look nice. That place is very fractured, and the only way Afghanistan is going to fix itself is if it fixes itself.
When did you arrive back home, and how were you welcomed?
We came home, I want to say May 27th. I was welcomed by my wife with my newborn son. That was a really epic day. Before that, I was not really, it's hard to say how I felt about being a father, but, it's kind of, something kicked in that day. It was kind of, something good just changed. It was good to hold my son, and never, somebody that was mine, not some other kid. This is my kid. So yes, I got to see my wife and my son. Doc King came to visit us. Doc Peck, who were in our last deployment. My buddy Sergeant Keeve came to visit us. Kyle Connolly came to welcome us back. It was just good seeing guys from the old unit. Get your family there. I know I cried a little bit when I came off the bus, and it was tears of happiness. But
What are some of the things you remember most about your service in Afghanistan?
The people, the guys. The guys from the unit. That's what I remember the most. I could tell you stories about stuff that happened with David and Keller and myself when we were fighting, or a certain lance corporal trying to open up his MRA with a knife, and Doc Garcia having to tape him shut, and he gets a field sutures the next day, Commander Bell, or doing Chi trying to walk across these canal crossings, and being his goofy self, and then pole vaulting canal crossings, just or Thanksgiving with John Wood, and we're cooking in the back of the castle in a makeshift stove, and making things like with spam and dried noodles and local produce and making the best out of it. That's what I remember as the people, the guys.
So just kind of briefly, what are your thoughts on how the war in Afghanistan progressed after you left?
A couple times it seemed like it kind of got a little more kinetic, but the more and more it was supposed to be turning over to the local military. I was a little disappointed they turned over our castle, and then wasn't too long after that, after we left. So, but
do you have any regrets?
Maybe not getting. I don't know if it necessarily is a regret. I just, we inherited a corpsman that was not trained up with us, and I watched guys go through a whole workup and then get pulled off, or people get dropped in at the last minute and didn't do any of the workup, and that was a disservice to them. While he did his best with what he had and with what the guys in the company were trying to show him, I think I could have did better by him on a few things, and then, but
You stayed in the Navy for a number of years after coming home from Afghanistan. How'd you spend the rest of your time in the service?
I finished my time out with Bravo Company and training the newer corpsmen coming in, passing, and got to the point where I was trying to pass on more of the knowledge I did have to newer corpsmen so that they could hopefully, be better and take over, because I was not going to be there. Not that I was anything great, but them to take over and keep running forward.
You stay connected with the people you served with now that you're out?
Yes. Talked to Frank Moran, Andrew Maestros, Justin Saunier, HM1 Bombach. Talk to you from time to time. I see a lot of them when we go up to the Memorial Golf Tournament for David Smith. Those are a lot of the big ones I really spend time with. Yeah.
Do you feel that your country is grateful for your service?
I think part of them are, yes. I think they are happy that we serve. While they're happy why we serve might be a different story, but I think they're happy. There's people out there that are willing to serve, yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, I really think that's pretty much it.
All right, Doc, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit for this interview. Just as a final closing question, as we mentioned at the beginning, this interview is going to be preserved in the Library of Congress with the Veterans History Project. So there's a pretty good likelihood that, your kids are going to see it, grandkids and on down the line. Is there anything that you'd like to say to any family that you have or may have in the future who might be watching this?
Not this time. Thank you.
All right, Doc, I appreciate your time.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.